So this past year, 2020, has started 2016 as the hottest year on record. The year was characterized by heat waves, droughts, wildfire and raging hurricanes. Reports suggest this is the sixth consecutive year in which global temperatures were the highest on record. What are the consequences then of such temperatures for the planet and you and I? To help us unpack these latest findings, we can now speak to Global Change Institute's Francios Engelbrecht, who's joining us by Skype tonight. Good to see you, Francios. So, a worrying development, the science world is saying, at least these European scientists are saying, but not unexpected, was it?
Good evening, Thembe. Thanks for having me. Yes, no, you're absolutely correct. The last 6 years are the warmest 6 years in the historical record. So records go back all the way to 1850. It is most certainly a concern because global warming just continues from one year to the next. And as many viewers will know, this is of course directly attributable to the fact that carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere are continuing to rise. And as long as the world's economy depends largely on fossil fuels to fuel and drive the economies of the various industrial countries across the world, the problem of global warming will be with us. So the last, if we, for example, would have a look at the warmest 20 years on the record, we find 19 of those in the last 20 years. So 2020, why it is also so concerning that it has been such a warm year, tying with 2016 for the warmest year on record, is the fact that this is a so-called La Nina year. La Nina years are typically years during which the Earth tends to be a little bit cooler than the long-term average. Because of the cooling that takes place in the Pacific Ocean. Now, back in 2016, we had the opposite event, the big El Nino event, and the planet was supposed to be exceptionally warm, and it was. But now in 2020, despite the presence of this La Nina event, the world still tied its long-term record in terms of the global average temperature. So most certainly, we are living in the days of global warming and the climate crisis.
And on El Nino and La Nina, I remember when we had the El Nino situation, it manifested in South Africa as a drought. We saw various farmers in the country losing their livestock and crops as a result. How is the cooler weather of 2020 manifesting in South Africa's conditions?
Well, we had in the start of this past summer season, so back in September and October and also November, we had a good onset of rainfall over the eastern parts of South Africa. And as the viewers that live in the eastern parts of the country will know, we frequently saw these cloud bands forming, and there were many thunderstorm events during the past summer. So it does look as if this summer season is going to bring us, by the time that we reach the end of the season in March, at least normal rainfall for most of the eastern parts of the country. We may still have higher than normal rainfall during January to February and maybe March as well. So we may still end up having an above normal summer rainfall season over much of eastern South Africa. The exception at the moment remains parts of the interior of the Eastern Cape. So this part of South Africa remains in the grip of an extreme drought, despite the good rainfall that has occurred over so many other parts of eastern South Africa.
And just on the global effort to try and bring down carbon emissions and the rest of it, 2015, the signing of the Paris Climate Accord, we're now going into 6 years since that agreement was signed by world leaders. Are we beginning to see any real benefit from those commitments?
That is such an important question for 2021. 2020 was supposed to be the year of enhanced climate action from across the world. So in 2020, as you've just alluded, we've reached the 5-year point after the Paris Agreement, that landmark agreement that is trying to mitigate climate change. So 2020 was supposed to be the year during which all countries in the world would have renewed their commitments in terms of reducing carbon dioxide emissions. So 2021 will now have to carry that flag. In November, we'll have the 26th Conference of the Parties in Scotland, and that's going to be the landmark meeting. So the hope is that the big economies of the world, specifically the United States, now under the Biden administration, and China, that these two superpowers will commit them to so-called net zero carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2050, with quite massive reductions already by the year 2030. So already Japan, South Korea, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and also our own country, South Africa, have all committed themselves to net zero carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2050. So if the two superpowers are going to join this pact, it can really change the climate change mitigation process, and we may really, for the first time, stand a chance of slowing down and eventually stopping this process of global warming.
All right. Francois Engelbrecht from the Global Change Institute. Good to speak to you tonight, sir.